This is the Bible Book Club. I'm Heather.
And I'm Susan.
And we're in the book of 1 Kings. Welcome to the club. Last time in chapter 1 of 1 Kings, we opened with an aging king. King David is old and his body is failing so much that he has a beautiful young girl named Abishag to keep him warm. Adonijah, David's son, takes advantage of the situation and he rallies support in an attempt to become king. Nathanael found out and he and Bathsheba told David. Well, David rallies enough to pronounce Solomon king. Solomon then pardoned Adonijah as long as he is willing to behave.
And we'll find out he's not going to be willing. All right, Solomon is on the throne and David is failing fast. Scene 1, David's final words to Solomon.
When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon, his son. I am about to go the way of all the earth, he said. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel.
David encourages Solomon to do 3 things as a leader. Be strong, keep God's laws, and walk faithfully with all your heart and soul. What David is doing here is reiterating all he had been taught as an Israelite. David wants Solomon to learn from Joshua to be strong. This is the theme from the book of Joshua, season 6 of Bible Book Club. Both Moses and God commissioned Joshua to be strong and courageous, and David wants the same for Solomon. Then David wants Solomon to learn from Moses to keep God's laws. This was a theme from Deuteronomy and Moses in season 5 of Bible Book Club. Moses spent his entire life urging the people to love the Lord and keep his laws so that they could have a relationship with God, as was outlined in the Mosaic covenant. So far, David's telling Solomon, be like Joshua, be like what Moses said. Keep the commandments. Last of all, David wants Solomon to learn from his own example, to love the Lord. David asks Solomon to walk faithfully and to love the Lord with all his heart and soul. Now, this is a command that was first given by Moses in Deuteronomy 6 and then reiterated by Joshua in Joshua 22. So now we have a word from Joshua, a word from Moses, and a word from all 3, Moses, Joshua, and David, want Solomon to love the Lord. David knew that it was this command, most of all, that gave him favor with God. David loved the Lord. And because he loved the Lord, he obeyed the Lord. Okay, David is teaching Solomon that the heart and the commands go hand in hand. This is what will make Solomon successful. This is how he will find favor with God. This is also true for us. If we love the Lord, we will obey his word. The Apostle John said it best in the New Testament, and he said it often. Listen.
1 John 5:3. In fact, this is love for God, to keep his commands. And his commands are not burdensome, for everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith.
David's message to Solomon is the same as Jesus' message to us.
In John 15, verse 9, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete.
The bottom line is loving God plus keeping his commands equals complete joy. And that is the message David is giving Solomon. So having encouraged Solomon in his faith, David moves on now. And he asks Solomon to take care of 3 items of unfinished business that must have been preying on his mind, because it was the obligation of the king to pursue justice. And these are about justice. David had neglected several times to execute this justice, and so he tasked poor Solomon to do it for him.
Now back to our story in 1 Kings chapter 2, continuing in verse 5. Now you yourself know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's armies, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime as if in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. Deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace, but show kindness to the sons of Berzali of Gilead, and let them be among those who eat at your table. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. And remember, you have with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Purim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Mahanaim. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword. But now, do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood.
Okay, so I kind of think it was wrong of David to pass two of these responsibilities on to Solomon, because two of these men were important in Israel, and there could be outrage against Solomon for what he's about to do. And on top of that, the justification for the judgment did not happen during Solomon's time, so it's not like he was at all involved. So this is a breakdown of what David wants Solomon to do for him. First, Joab must suffer consequences for killing Abner and Amasa. Now, Joab killed Israel's commanders during a time of peace, not war. He killed Abner out of revenge because Abner killed Joab's brother in battle. And he killed Amasa out of jealousy because Amasa took his job as commander of the army. In other words, David saying, kill Joab because he can't be trusted, which was true, but David should have killed Joab. Second, and this one's okay, be kind to Barzillai's family with what equated to a pension of sorts. So Solomon's supposed to give them a pension. Barzillai was a wealthy man who had supplied David and his entourage with food on his flight from Jerusalem and on his return. So David is bequeathing Barzillai's family with an allowance of sorts, which may have included food, a house, and even more land. Now, the third, Shimei, must suffer consequences for disloyalty. Shimei had cursed David on his flight from Jerusalem, which was a capital offense. But remember, at the time, Abishai wanted to kill Shimei, and David said no. Now, David's telling Solomon to do it. In other words, he's saying, kill Shimei because he can't be trusted again. Twice, David tells Solomon to deal with these people, specifically Joab and Shimei, according to his wisdom. Is it any wonder that Solomon asked God for wisdom in chapter 3, like, oh, shoot, I got to kill these people? This is not a good look for me as a new king. How was he going to smoothly pull off killing the long-standing commander of the army, Joab, who had done a lot of good for Israel? The responsibility for justice is a heavy load, especially when capital punishment is involved. And this is one of the first things Solomon has to face.
It's kind of like David is sitting there going through all the regrets of his life and now passing, like, I'm not going to be able to finish this. I really should have done it different.
Exactly.
Fix it for me.
It's weighing on his mind that you get the sense that all of a sudden, not only that, but remember in the last episode when he made Solomon king, he had procrastinated that. He should have done it earlier where Adonijah wouldn't have tried to steal the crown. So yes, all of a sudden David's facing his death and he's like, oh, I got to play catch up here quick.
Yeah. He also should tell him, hey, I didn't discipline my kids, so maybe you could help me out with that too.
Exactly. Well, yeah, he's paying for that now. Okay, scene 2, David rests in peace.
Verse 10, Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established.
Our recent episodes in 2 Samuel and here in Kings paint a sad picture of an older David who has neglected to lead as he had in his younger years. And while this painting is not false, we cannot leave David, such a great man, on such a diminished note. David was a man after God's own heart, and it was this characteristic alone that made his reputation and legacy in the Bible unparalleled. His heart for the Lord is what gave him the courage to kill Goliath, the humility to live as an outlaw while Saul maligned his reputation and tried to murder him, the perseverance to wait for God to remove Saul instead of avenging himself and killing Saul, the steady conviction as a military commander that God would give them victory, the deep conviction of his sin with Bathsheba and Uriah, and the humble acceptance of the consequences that followed. Despite becoming a great and powerful king, David never lost the heart of the humble shepherd. He is the standard for all the kings of Israel going forward. His name is mentioned over 920 times, second only to God, who's mentioned over 3,000, and Jesus over 1,000, and way ahead of Moses, Abraham, and all of the forefathers. David is mentioned more than them. There is no doubt that David was special to the Lord and an example of love for the Lord that prevails for a lifetime, faith that God's ways are always right, humility to acknowledge sin, and conviction that leads to repentance. David is an example to us that when we love the Lord above all else, God can and will use us even when we stumble. And so David finds rest here in chapter 2 of 1 Kings. Rest from over 40 years of battles. Rest from way too many sons with too much ambition. Rest from a fickle nation that often turned on him. It was a well-deserved rest after a lifetime of chasing after the heart of the Lord. Finally, David could be still and simply sit at the feet of the Lord in adoration of the one who had always been the desire of his heart. Scene 3, Solomon secures the throne. Solomon begins his reign by removing all who threaten it. This was customary at the time, so if it sounds really harsh, know that it was a common practice. Solomon secures the throne first with the death of Adonijah.
Verse 13. Now Adonijah, son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Bathsheba asked him, "Do you come peacefully?" He answered, "Yes, peacefully." Then he added, "I have something to say to you." "You may say it," she replied. "As you know," he said, "the kingdom is mine. All Israel looked to me as their king. But things changed, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." "You may make it," she said. So he continued, "Please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife." "Very well," Bathsheba replied, "I will speak to the king for you."
So, Adonijah approaches very humbly and, admits that, well, hey, my brother got the kingdom, so can I have David's concubine? Now, Bathsheba was a respected woman of influence, obviously. In the last chapter, Nathan asks Bathsheba to approach David with the news of Adonijah trying to take the throne from Solomon. In this chapter, Adonijah asked Bathsheba to approach Solomon in another underhanded attempt to take the throne from Solomon. Bathsheba must have had good relationships with both David and Solomon because she did not fear approaching either king.
Continuing in verse 19, when Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on his throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. "I have one small request to make of you," she said. "Do not refuse me." The king replied, "Make it, my mother. I will not refuse you." So she said, "Let Abishag, the Shunammite, be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah." King Solomon answered his mother, "Why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother, yes, for him and for Abiathar the priest and Joab, son of Zeruiah."
So what you look confused, Heather. What Solomon is saying here is that you might as well ask for the kingdom because I know what Adonijah wants.
Well, it seems like
okay. So
yes,
let me explain
for him
it.
and for why are they mentioning Abiathar the priest? And
Okay,
Joab,
I'm going to tell you. First of all, Solomon tells his mother, "Oh, I'll give you whatever you want." But then he asks for the concubine, and Solomon gets really mad because he reads through this request right away. I don't know how Bathsheba missed it, and he goes, "Why do you request Abishag for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he's my older brother." Yeah. Request the kingdom for him, for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab, because those three were the ones who rose up against Solomon and tried to make Adonijah king. And that's what they're trying to do again, because when you sleep with the concubine of a king, you're making a claim on the kingdom.
Got it. Continuing in verse 23. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. And now, as surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David and has founded a dynasty for me, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonijah and he died.
Adonijah was given a reprieve by Solomon in chapter 1 when he tried to steal the crown from Solomon for the first time. But Adonijah is probably at it again, and we should not be surprised. Primogeniture, or the right of the firstborn to inherit, was common practice back then. And in fact, it will be how all the kings going forward are chosen. David and Solomon are the only kings in Israel's history who were divinely chosen. Now, because Adonijah is the oldest living son, he probably couldn't get past the fact that he should be king. But he needed to convince Israel of that because he already failed one time. So to begin again, he goes after a possession of David's, Abishag. Now, as I mentioned, a claim on a king's wife or concubine was a claim on the crown. Absalom was a horrific example of this in 2 Samuel 16, where he slept with 10 of David's concubines for all Israel to see. He was claiming them as a statement that he was now the king instead of David. In the last chapter, it was not confirmed that Abishag was a concubine, but most assume she was, as she was a virgin who slept in the king's bed. Now, even though it says that she and David didn't have sexual relations. Now, Adonijah may have also wanted Abishag for another reason, to silence her as a witness. Because remember, Abishag was present when David stated that Solomon was to be king and not Adonijah. It was only Nathan, Bathsheba, and Abishag.
Because she was the one warming him in the bed.
Correct. So if Adonijah had power over Abishag, he could force her to refute David's words, possibly. So there were lots of reasons why he could have wanted her. Solomon gave Adonijah a chance to live if he did not do evil. But Adonijah just
didn't take long, did it?
No, he cannot help himself. And his request for Abishag was either an evil attempt at the crown or a ridiculously stupid request out of desire for a beautiful woman. I think it had to have been the former. Solomon was not taking any chances and wasted no time in executing Adonijah. Scene 4. Solomon secures the throne with the retirement of Abiathar.
Verse 26. To Abiathar the priest, the king said, go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships. So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli.
Abiathar had supported Adonijah, and Solomon gives him clemency because up until that time, he had faithfully supported David. His sentence is removal from the priesthood and exile to Anathoth. Scene 5, Solomon secures the throne with the death of Joab.
Verse 28. When the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, though not with Absalom, he fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Then Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, go strike him down. So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, the king says, come out. But he answered, no, I will die here. Benaiah reported to the king, this is how Joab answered me. Then the king commanded Benaiah, do as he says, strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will repay him for the blood he shed, because without my father David knowing it, he attacked 2 men and killed them with the sword. Both of them, Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army, were better men and more upright than he. May the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever. But on David and his descendants, his house and his throne, may there be the Lord's peace forever. So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck down Joab and killed him, and he was buried at his home out in the country. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in Joab's position, and replaced Abiathar with Zadok the priest.
So Joab, always in tune with Jerusalem's news, hears of Adonijah's death and Abiathar's exile, and he knows what's going down. He runs for asylum in the sanctuary. But Joab is without a case. The law of Moses offered protection at the altar for those guilty of accidental crimes, but not premeditated murder. Joab had murdered with intent and with deception and against David's wishes. And God had commanded that there must be retribution for bloodshed. Benaiah, David's trusted old commander of the bodyguards, is now Solomon's trusted guard and new commander over the army. Benaiah didn't hesitate. He was probably thinking the punishment for Joab was way overdue and that David should have ordered him to do it years ago. It was a sad ending for a man who otherwise had a brilliant military career. Joab was a mix of good and bad that left his record lukewarm. He was fiercely loyal to Israel and his military calling, but he was also disobedient to David and very violent. Joab had been with David even in the beginning when he was forced to wander in the wilderness for 14 years. David could not forget all they had been through together over the years, all the good that Joab had done loyally by his side, and he just could not kill him. So the justice was left to Solomon.
And I think that is true about all of the deathbed confessions that he was giving. It wasn't that he was derelict in his duties and what he needed to do. He just really loved people.
Yeah.
And it was hard for him to do things that would be hard on them.
Well, it's two sides of a tender heart. David had a heart for the Lord. He also had a heart for the people. And that just made him a little bit weak when it came to meting out justice.
Yeah.
Okay, scene 6. Solomon secures the throne with the house arrest of Shimei.
Verse 36. Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your own head." Shimei answered the king, "What you say is good. Your servant will do as my lord the king has said." And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time.
Solomon determines that Shimei's sin is not cause for execution. However, as a Benjaminite loyal to the family of Saul, he is a potential threat. So Solomon sought to separate Shimei from his people by putting him on house arrest in Jerusalem. Shimei cannot go home. He must stay in Jerusalem.
Verse 39. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath, and Shimei was told, "Your slaves are in Gath." At this, he saddled his donkey and went to Achish at Gath in search of his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, on the day you leave to go anywhere else, you can be sure you will die? At that time you said to me, 'What you say is good, I will obey.' Well, why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you?" The king also said to Shimei, "You know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing, but King Solomon will be blessed and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever." Then the king gave the order to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. The kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands.
Shimei disobeyed, giving Solomon justification for execution. In all 4 of these situations, Adonijah, Abiathar, Joab, and Shimei, Solomon wisely and swiftly administered the law. He also obeyed David's final commands in doing this. and completed his father's unfinished business in 3 years' time. The security of the kingdom is now firmly established in Solomon's hands. Peace has finally come to Israel. For the first time, the king of Israel will have the time and resources to do more than fight battles. And in the next episode, Solomon will begin to use that time very wisely.
What's a club without friends? If you're enjoying the Bible Book Club, why don't you share it? And then you can say, Welcome to the club. New episodes drop every Monday, and get all episodes now on Amazon Music. As always, head over to susanme.com/Bible Book Club for show notes from today's episode. Bible Book Club is hosted by Susan Merrill and Heather Rubio, edited by Buck Buchanan, produced by Haley Mawat.